Sophia Chen tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear as she stood in front of her apartment mirror. The ivory blouse she'd bought 3 years ago for her cousin's wedding would have to do. She smoothed the slightly wrinkled fabric and sighed, wondering for the 10th time why she had agreed to attend this party. The invitation sat on her dresser, heavy cream-colored paper with gold lettering that seemed to mock her modest surroundings. Mr. Richard Harrington requests the pleasure of your company. She had been teaching piano to his niece Lily for almost 2 years now, but had never expected an invitation to one of his famous gatherings. It's just one evening, Sophia told her reflection. Just smile, make polite conversation, and leave early. The Uber ride to the Harrington estate took her from her working-class neighborhood to the hills overlooking the city, where homes grew larger and driveways longer with each passing mile. When the car finally pulled up to a set of ornate gates, Sophia's stomach tightened. Beyond the gates, a winding driveway led to a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. Have a good night, the driver said, looking impressed as the gate swung open. Sophia clutched her small handbag and walked up the driveway, gravel crunching beneath her only pair of heels. 2 stone lions flanked the massive front door, their eyes seeming to follow her as she approached. Before she could even knock, the door swung open, revealing a man in a crisp black suit. Good evening, miss. May I have your name? Sophia Chen. I'm Lily's piano teacher. The man nodded and gestured for her to enter. Mr. Harrington's guests are gathering in the main hall. The foyer alone was bigger than Sophia's entire apartment, with a chandelier that dripped crystal and a marble staircase sweeping upward. The sound of conversation and laughter drew her toward a set of open doors, through which she could see at least 50 people mingling, all dressed in clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. As she hovered uncertainly at the entrance to the room, a voice called out, "Miss Chen!" Lily, a bright-eyed 12-year-old, darted through the crowd toward her. Unlike the adults dressed in evening wear, Lily wore jeans and a t-shirt with a cartoon character Sophia didn't recognize. You came. I told Uncle Rich you might not, 'cause you're always busy, but I'm glad you did. Lily grabbed her hand. Come on, I want to show you something. Grateful for the rescue, Sophia allowed herself to be pulled through the crowd. She noticed a few curious glances as she passed, but most of the guests were too engrossed in their own conversations to pay attention to her. Lily led her to a corner of the room where a magnificent grand piano stood, its black surface gleaming under the soft lighting. Uncle Rich got it last month, Lily explained. It's a Steinway Model D. He says it's the same kind they use in concert halls. Sophia's breath caught. She had played on a Steinway Model D once, years ago, during the competition that should have launched her career, before everything fell apart. It's beautiful, she said softly, resisting the urge to touch the keys. Maybe you could play something later, Lily suggested hopefully. Sophia shook her head quickly. Oh no, I'm just a guest tonight. But you're the best player I know. Even better than Ms. Harrison at school, and she was on TV once. Before Sophia could respond, a waiter appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Sophia took one gratefully, though she rarely drank. Lily, your mother is looking for you, the waiter said with a smile. Lily rolled her eyes but nodded. I'll be back later, Miss Chen. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sophia alone beside the piano. For the next hour, Sophia drifted around the edges of the party, occasionally making small talk when someone approached her. She learned that most guests were either business associates of Richard Harrington or fellow tech industry elites. When asked about herself, she kept her answers vague. Just a piano teacher. Nothing special. What she didn't say was that 15 years ago, music critics had called her one of the most promising young pianists of her generation, that she had won international competitions and been offered a place at Juilliard, that her parents had sacrificed everything for her talent, and then lost everything when her father's illness struck. Instead, she smiled and nodded and counted the minutes until she could politely leave. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. Sophia turned to find herself face to face with Richard Harrington himself. In his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp jawline, he looked exactly like the photos she'd seen in business magazines. His blue eyes crinkled with amusement as he extended his hand. Richard Harrington. You must be Sophia Chen, Lily's piano teacher. She talks about you constantly. Sophia shook his hand, surprised by his firm grip. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Harrington. You have a lovely home. Please call me Richard. And thank you. I can give you a tour later if you'd like. That's very kind, but I won't be staying long. Richard raised an eyebrow. Not enjoying yourself? Sophia felt her cheeks warm. No, it's not that. I just have an early morning tomorrow. Ah, the dedicated teacher. Lily says you never miss a lesson, even when she begged you to reschedule so she could go to a friend's birthday party. Despite her discomfort, Sophia smiled at the memory. She tried very hard to convince me, but consistency is important in learning an instrument. Indeed, discipline is the foundation of success in any field. Richard studied her for a moment. Lily also mentioned you're quite talented yourself. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. I'm adequate enough to teach beginners. Somehow I doubt adequate would satisfy Lily. She has remarkably high standards for a 12-year-old. Before Sophia could respond, a tall woman in a striking red dress approached them. Rich, darling, you simply must introduce me to your new friend. Her voice was smooth as honey, her smile dazzling. Vanessa, this is Sophia Chen, Lily's piano teacher. Sophia, Vanessa Blackwell, an old friend and terrible gossip. Vanessa laughed, not the least bit offended. Only about people who deserve it, darling. She turned her attention to Sophia. So you're the miracle worker who got Lily to practice regularly. Her previous teachers all gave up. Lily is very talented when she applies herself, Sophia said diplomatically. How diplomatic. I imagine she can be a little monster when she wants to be. Just like her uncle. Vanessa winked at Richard, who rolled his eyes good-naturedly. As they chatted, more guests joined their small circle, each introducing themselves with names attached to tech companies, investment firms, or family fortunes Sophia had only read about. She felt increasingly out of place, like a sparrow among peacocks. Richard, seemingly noticing her discomfort, suddenly raised his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just had a wonderful idea. As you know, I recently acquired a Steinway concert grand, and it happens we have a pianist in our midst. All eyes turned to Sophia, who felt the blood drain from her face. Miss Chen is too modest to mention it, but according to my niece, she is quite extraordinary. Perhaps we could persuade her to favor us with a performance. There were murmurs of agreement and encouraging nods. Sophia's heart began to race. She hadn't performed in public since she was 19, hadn't touched a concert grand in years. Her students' upright pianos and electronic keyboards were a far cry from the magnificent instrument waiting in the corner. I couldn't possibly, she stammered. I'm not prepared. Nonsense, Richard said smoothly. A true musician is always ready to play. Consider it a small favor in return for the champagne you've been enjoying. There was scattered laughter, and Sophia realized with a sinking feeling that this had somehow become a challenge. The wealthy host was daring her to play, perhaps expecting her to embarrass herself for his guests' entertainment. Uncle Rich, stop being mean. Lily had appeared at his elbow, frowning up at him. Miss Chen doesn't have to play if she doesn't want to. Richard looked down at his niece, then back at Sophia, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Of course not. I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable, Miss Chen. But the damage was done. The guests were looking at her expectantly, and Sophia suddenly felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, perhaps, or defiance. No, it's all right, she heard herself say. I'd be happy to play something, though I can't promise it will be worth listening to. As the crowd parted to make way for her, Sophia walked toward the piano, with her head held high. Her hands were trembling slightly, but there was a strange calm settling over her, like the quiet before a storm. She sat down on the bench, adjusting its height automatically. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and for a moment she wondered what to play. Something simple and pleasant, perhaps? A Mozart sonata or a Chopin waltz? But as she looked up and caught Richard's eye, saw the slight smirk on his face, something shifted inside her. He thought he knew who she was. Just a piano teacher, someone to provide background music at his party. He had no idea of the fire he was about to unleash. Sophia took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Sophia's fingers connected with the ivory keys, and the first notes of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor filled the room. The opening was gentle, almost hesitant, much like Sophia herself. A few guests continued their conversations in hushed tones, barely paying attention to what they assumed would be pleasant background music. But something was happening to Sophia. The piano responded to her touch like an old friend welcoming her home. Each key had just the right amount of resistance, each note rang with perfect clarity. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: the countless hours of practice, the joy of surrendering to the music. As the piece progressed from its deceptively simple beginning to more complex passages, the room gradually fell silent. Glasses stopped clinking. Whispers faded away. All eyes turned toward the corner where the unassuming piano teacher was, transforming before them. Richard Harrington had been midway through a conversation about a new investment when he noticed the change in atmosphere. He turned to look at Sophia and froze, champagne flute halfway to his lips. The woman at the piano barely resembled the shy teacher who had been trying to blend into the wallpaper all evening. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, her entire body swaying slightly with the emotion of the piece. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with breathtaking speed and precision, drawing sounds from the instrument that he hadn't known it could make. The ballad built in intensity, and Sophia was no longer in a mansion in the hills. She was 19 again, playing for her life on a stage in Vienna, her parents watching proudly from the front row, her future stretching bright and limitless before her. All the pain, all the disappointment, all the years of teaching children simple melodies instead of performing the masterpieces she had once lived for. She poured everything into the music. In the front row of onlookers, Lily stood with her mouth slightly open, seeing her teacher truly play for the first time. Beside her, a tall, elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, listened with her eyes closed, one hand pressed against her heart. When Sophia reached the thunderous climax of the piece, several guests actually gasped. Her hands became a blur, leaping across octaves, drawing forth cascades of notes that seemed impossible for 10 fingers to produce. The emotional intensity was almost unbearable. Joy and sorrow intertwined, hope battling despair, beauty emerging from chaos. And then, as suddenly as a summer storm passes, the piece quieted. Sophia's hands gentled on the keys, drawing out the final melancholy notes with exquisite tenderness. The last chord hung in the air for a long moment before fading into silence. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The spell Sophia had cast remained unbroken. Then Lily started clapping wildly and the room erupted. Guests who moments ago had barely acknowledged Sophia's existence were on their feet, applauding with genuine emotion. Some dabbed at their eyes. Others looked stunned, as if they'd witnessed something they couldn't quite explain. Sophia sat motionless at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. She felt dizzy, almost lightheaded. It had been so long, so very long, since she had truly played, since she had opened that locked chamber in her heart where her real self lived. Bravo! Bravo! The silver-haired woman pushed through the crowd, her eyes shining with tears. She reached Sophia and took both her hands in her own. My dear, that was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Sophia blushed, overwhelmed by the reaction. Thank you. No, thank you. It's been years since I heard the ballade played with such understanding. The woman squeezed her hands. Forgive me, I'm Eleanor Winters. Sophia's eyes widened. Eleanor Winters was a legend in the classical music world. A renowned pianist who had performed with every major orchestra before founding the Winters Music Foundation, which supported young artists. I know who you are, Ms. Winters, Sophia said softly. It's an honor to meet you. Eleanor studied her face intently. Have we met before? There's something familiar about you. Before Sophia could answer, Richard appeared at Eleanor's side. Gone was the slightly mocking smile, replaced by an expression of genuine awe. Miss Chen, I must apologize, he said, his voice humbler than it had been all evening. When Lily said you were talented, I assumed she meant... He trailed off, clearly embarrassed. You assumed she meant I could play for Elise nicely, Sophia finished for him, a small smile playing on her lips. Richard laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Something like that. I never imagined. Well, that was world-class playing. You could be performing in concert halls. A shadow crossed Sophia's face. Once, perhaps. Eleanor was still watching her closely. Vienna 2009, she said suddenly. The International Chopin Competition. You won first prize. The room, which had been buzzing with excited conversation, fell quiet again. Sophia felt her chest tighten. You have a good memory, Ms. Winters. I was on the jury, Eleanor said. Your ballet was magnificent then too, but tonight there was something more. She turned to Richard. This young woman was the most promising pianist of her generation. The critics called her a once-in-a-lifetime talent. Eleanor looked back at Sophia, and then she disappeared. The music world waited for a debut that never happened. Sophia felt dozens of curious eyes on her. Her private history, the pain she had carried alone for so many years, was suddenly becoming public entertainment. She stood up from the piano bench, her legs unsteady. "It was a long time ago," she said quietly. "If you'll excuse me, I need some air." She made her way through the crowd, accepting compliments with brief nods but continuing toward the terrace doors. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. She gripped the stone balustrade, taking deep breaths as she gazed out at the twinkling city lights below. The sound of the door opening behind her made her shoulders tense. "May I join you?" It was Eleanor Winters. Sophia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Eleanor came to stand beside her, respecting her silence for a few moments before speaking. "I've often wondered what happened to you," she said gently. "We all did. It's not common for a talent like yours to simply vanish." Sophia watched a distant airplane crossing the night sky, its lights blinking steadily. "Life happened," she said finally. "My father got sick, pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it." Eleanor made a soft sound of sympathy but didn't interrupt. "The medical bills piled up. My parents had spent everything they had on my training, competitions, traveling to performances. They'd remortgaged their house twice." Sophia's voice was flat, as if she were reading from a script rather than telling her own story. "My Juilliard acceptance came the same week as my father's diagnosis. There was no money left for tuition, even with the partial scholarship." "You could have found sponsors," Eleanor said. "With your talent, I needed to work, not practice 8 hours a day," Sophia cut in. "Dad died 6 months later. Mom was broken, emotionally, financially. Someone had to hold things together." The memory of those dark days washed over her. The hospital corridors, the collection notices, her mother's vacant eyes. The way her fingers had cramped from typing data entry forms all day instead of playing scales and arpeggios. By the time things stabilized, years had passed. I was teaching piano to neighborhood kids to make ends meet. The concert world is not forgiving of long absences, especially at the beginning of a career. Sophia turned to look at Eleanor directly. "I made my choice." Eleanor's eyes were kind but penetrating. "And yet when you played tonight, it was clear that choice has haunted you." Sophia didn't answer. What could she say? That sometimes, alone in her apartment, she still played the great concertos from memory. Her cheap, upright piano a poor substitute for an orchestra. That she sometimes woke from dreams of standing on stage bathed in applause. That every time she corrected a student's simple mistake, part of her withered a little more. The terrace door opened again and Lily bounded out, followed more slowly by Richard. "Miss Chen." That was amazing. "Why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" "You're like famous." Lily's face was alight with excitement. "Not famous, Lily," Sophia said with a small smile. "Just someone who used to play a little better than I let on." "A little better?" Richard repeated incredulously. "What you did in there wasn't a little better than teaching Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to children. It was—" He shook his head, seeming at a loss for words. "It was artistry of the highest order," Eleanor finished for him. "And it shouldn't be lost to the world." Sophia felt a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. She quickly extinguished it. "It's very kind of you all to say so, but my life is different now. I'm a teacher, not a performer." "But you could be both," Eleanor said. She reached into her evening bag and pulled out a business card, offering it to Sophia. "My foundation supports artists at all stages of their careers. We have a special program for those who need to make a comeback or who started late. Or who gave up," Sophia asked, not reaching for the card. "Who paused," Eleanor corrected firmly. "No one who plays as you just did has truly given up. The music is still there, waiting." Lily tugged at Sophia's hand. "Please take it, Miss Chen. Please." Looking down at Lily's earnest face, Sophia felt something crack inside her. A wall she had built so carefully, stone by stone, year after year. With a slightly shaking hand, she accepted Eleanor's card. "I'm not promising anything," she warned. "Of course not," Eleanor said with a smile that suggested she knew better. "Just come talk to me. That's all I ask." Richard cleared his throat. "And I hope you'll consider coming back to play on my piano whenever you wish." It seems criminal to have an instrument like that and not have it touched by hands that can do it justice. The conversation was interrupted by Vanessa, who swept onto the terrace with several other guests in tow. There she is, our hidden virtuoso. Darling, you simply must play something else for us. The night is young. Sophia found herself surrounded by admiring strangers, all asking questions about her training, her influences, her favorite composers. Their interest seemed genuine, not the polite small talk from earlier. Something had shifted. She had walked onto the terrace as Sophia Chen, unremarkable piano teacher. She was returning to the party as someone else entirely, someone she had thought was gone forever. As the group moved back inside, Sophia felt Eleanor's hand on her arm, holding her back for a moment. The choice isn't only between the past and the present, the older woman said quietly. There's also the future to consider. Sophia nodded, tucking Eleanor's card carefully into her purse. For the first time in 15 years, the future suddenly seemed full of possibilities. The morning after the party, Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through her blinds and the lingering melody of Chopin in her mind. For a moment she wondered if it had all been a dream, the mansion, the perfect piano, the applause. Then she spotted her purse on the dresser, Eleanor Winters's business card peeking out from the side pocket, and reality came flooding back. She reached for her phone and was startled to find 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. Most were from her piano students and their parents, all saying variations of the same thing. Is it true? Are you really a famous pianist? Sophia groaned and fell back against her pillows. Apparently Lily had wasted no time spreading the news. The final message was from Richard Harrington himself, apologizing for his niece's enthusiasm, but inviting Sophia to return to play on his piano anytime she wished. This is insane, she muttered to herself, setting the phone aside without responding to anyone. She went through her morning routine on autopilot, shower, coffee, toast, all while her mind replayed the previous night's events. The feeling of the Steinway beneath her fingers, the way the music had poured out of her, as if 15 years of silence had only made it more powerful, the look on Eleanor's face when she recognized her, Eleanor Winters. The woman had been her idol once. Sophia had worn out recordings of Eleanor playing Rachmaninoff, had studied interviews where she discussed technique and interpretation, and now she had Eleanor's card sitting on her kitchen counter like an unexploded bomb. Sophia's first student wasn't due until noon, giving her a rare morning to herself. She found herself sitting at her own piano, a second-hand upright with slightly yellowed keys and a tendency to go out of tune in humid weather. It was nothing like Richard's gleaming Steinway, but it had served her well enough. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. What if last night had been a fluke? What if the magic had been in that particular piano, that particular moment? What if she tried to recapture it and found herself awkward and rusty again? Stop overthinking, she told herself firmly. She began with scales, the simple exercises she assigned to beginners. C major, up and down, steady rhythm. G major, D major. Her fingers remembered, muscle memory taking over. She moved to arpeggios, then to a simple Clementi sonatina she often taught intermediate students. It felt good, comfortable, safe. But safe wasn't what had made the crowd fall silent last night. Safe wasn't what had brought tears to Eleanor Winters' eyes. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sophia launched into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a piece she hadn't played in years. With its thunderous octaves and dramatic shifts in dynamics, it was like riding a wild horse requiring complete concentration and surrender. When the final chord rang out, Sophia was breathing hard, her heart racing. It wasn't perfect. There were fumbled notes, passages where her technique showed the long absence of proper practice. But the essence was there, the passion, the understanding, the ability to speak through the music. A knock at her door startled her back to reality. She glanced at the clock, still an hour before her first student. Puzzled, she went to answer it. Eleanor Winters stood in the hallway, elegant even in a simple gray pantsuit, her silver hair immaculate. "Good morning, Sophia," she said, as if it were perfectly normal to appear unannounced at a near stranger's apartment. "I hope I'm not intruding. Richard's driver gave me your address." Sophia blinked in surprise. "Ms. Winters, please come in." She suddenly saw her apartment through a visitor's eyes, the mismatched furniture, the stack of music books on the coffee table, the faded curtains she'd been meaning to replace for years. It was clean but undeniably modest. If Eleanor noticed, she gave no sign. Her attention was immediately drawn to the piano, where Sophia's sheet music lay open. Rachmaninoff, she noted with approval. Were you playing when I knocked? I thought I heard something from the hallway. Sophia nodded, embarrassed. Just reacquainting myself with some pieces. Nothing serious, Eleanor repeated with a small smile. Rachmaninoff is always serious, my dear. She looked around the apartment. Do you have coffee? I find conversations about the future go better with coffee. The future? Your future, specifically. 20 minutes later, they sat at Sophia's small kitchen table, mugs of coffee between them. Eleanor had laid out a proposal that made Sophia's head spin, a special fellowship at the Winters Foundation, including a stipend, coaching with master teachers, and a series of recitals to reintroduce her to the classical music world. This is incredibly generous, Sophia said carefully, but I have students who depend on me. Teaching commitments. We can work around your schedule initially, Eleanor said, waving away the concern. Some of your students might even benefit from continuing with you as you reconnect with your own artistry. Sophia took a sip of coffee to hide her confusion. Why are you doing this, Ms. Winters? There are dozens of young pianists who would be more suitable for your foundation support. I'm 34. I've been out of serious music for 15 years. Eleanor set down her mug and looked Sophia directly in the eye. Do you know what I heard last night? Sophia waited, not sure how to respond. I heard music that came from somewhere beyond technique, beyond training. Don't misunderstand. Your technique is remarkable, especially considering your hiatus. But what moved that room to silence wasn't your fingers. It was your soul. Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the intensity in Eleanor's voice. The classical music world has plenty of technicians. Young people who can play every note perfectly, but say nothing with their music. What we lack are true artists. Eleanor leaned forward. You've lived, Sophia. You've suffered. You've sacrificed. And somehow, instead of breaking you, it's deepened your music. You got all that from one Chopin ballad? I've been in this business for 50 years. I know what I heard. Eleanor's expression softened. Richard told me about your father after you left last night, about the financial hardships. It's an all too common story in our field, Sophia stiffened. She didn't like the idea of her personal tragedy being discussed at a cocktail party after she'd gone. Eleanor seemed to sense her discomfort. He meant well. He's actually quite moved by your story. So much so that he's offered to be one of your sponsors if you decide to return to performing. Sponsors? Sophia echoed, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. Yes, he was quite insistent. Said something about making amends for treating you like entertainment rather than the artist you are. Eleanor chuckled. I think you made quite an impression. Sophia stood up suddenly, needing to move. She went to the window, looking out at the street below where normal life continued. People heading to work, a mail carrier delivering packages, a dog walker with 4 different-sized dogs on leashes. This is happening too fast, she said finally. Yesterday I was just a piano teacher. Today you're talking about sponsors and recitals and fellowships. No, Eleanor corrected gently. Yesterday you were a brilliant pianist pretending to be just a piano teacher. Today we're acknowledging the truth. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. Wasn't that exactly what she had been doing? Pretending, hiding, telling herself that she had made peace with her choices when really she had just been afraid. Afraid to hope, afraid to try and fail, afraid to admit how much she missed the life she might have had. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lily. Miss Chen, Mom says you were a super famous piano player. Why didn't you tell me? Are you going to be on stage now? Can I still have lessons? Despite herself, Sophia smiled at the string of question marks. Then another text came through. Uncle Rich says he's sorry if he embarrassed you. He can be a jerk sometimes, but he feels really bad. Everything all right? Eleanor asked. Just Lily, Richard's niece. She's excited about last night. Children have good instincts about music. She obviously sensed your gift even before you played the ballade. Sophia turned back from the window. If, and this is a big if, I were to consider your offer, what exactly would it involve? Practically speaking, Eleanor's eyes lit up, but she kept her tone measured. Initially, we would arrange for you to have access to a proper piano for daily practice. I have several Steinways in my foundation studio spaces. We'd start with technical work to rebuild your stamina and facility, along with a carefully chosen repertoire. The goal would be a small recital in about 6 months. Intimate setting, friendly audience, low pressure. It didn't sound so terrifying when she put it that way. 6 months was a reasonable timeline. A small recital wasn't Madison Square Garden. And my teaching? Sophia asked. As I said, we can work around your current students. Though you might find as your playing develops again that you want to adjust your teaching load. Eleanor set her empty mug on the table. You don't have to decide right now. Take a week. Think about it. Thank you. Sophia hesitated, then added, There's something else. My mother, she's not well. Early onset dementia. She lives in assisted living now, but I'm responsible for the costs. I can't give up a steady income. Instead of looking discouraged, Eleanor nodded with understanding. The fellowship includes a stipend specifically, so artists can focus on their work without financial stress. It would cover your mother's care. Richard's additional sponsorship would ensure you don't have to worry about money during this transition period. Sophia let out a shaky breath. The biggest practical obstacle addressed so simply. I'm scared, she admitted, the words barely audible. Eleanor stood and came to stand beside her at the window. Of course you are. Art should be a little frightening. It requires vulnerability, courage. What if I've waited too long? What if I can't get back what I lost? You won't get back what you lost, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. You'll find something new, something informed by who you've become. They were interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Sophia's first student of the day, a 10-year-old boy arriving early with his mother. Ms. Chen, is it true? The mother asked excitedly before Sophia could even say hello. Lily's mom told me you played at Richard Harrington's house last night and you're actually famous. Not famous, Sophia corrected automatically. I just used to play professionally a long time ago. Well, Lily's mom said you're going to be giving concerts now. Does that mean you won't be teaching Tommy anymore? Sophia felt a flash of irritation at how quickly news and misinformation had spread. I haven't made any decisions about anything. Mrs. Hayes, Tommy's lesson will proceed as usual today. She ushered the boy inside, aware of Eleanor watching the interaction with interest. My card has all my contact information, Eleanor said, picking up her purse. Call me when you're ready to talk more. And Sophia, yes? Whatever you decide, playing as you did last night was a gift to everyone in that room. Don't forget that. After Eleanor left, Sophia sat Tommy at the piano and began their lesson. She listened to him struggle through his assigned piece, gently correcting his hand position and tempo. Tommy, do you enjoy playing the piano? She asked suddenly. The boy considered this seriously, his freckled face scrunched in thought. Sometimes. When I get a piece right, it feels good. But practicing is boring, Sophia nodded. What if I played something for you? Would you like that? Tommy's eyes widened. Mom said you're really good. Like professional good? I used to be, Sophia said. She gently moved him to the side of the bench and positioned her hands on the keys. This is Debussy's Clair de Lune. It means moonlight in French. As she played the gentle, flowing piece, she watched Tommy's expression change from polite interest to genuine wonder. When the final notes faded, he looked up at her with new respect. That was awesome. Will I be able to play like that someday? Sophia smiled. With practice, yes. But you have to love it. Not just the result, but the journey. She thought about Eleanor's words, about her own interrupted journey and the possibility of resuming it. For the first time in 15 years, she allowed herself to imagine standing on a stage again, sharing what she knew, what she felt, what she had lived through the universal language of music. Ms. Chen? Tommy's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you okay? Sophia realized there were tears in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly. Yes, I'm fine. Let's get back to your lesson. But as Tommy resumed his simple piece, Sophia's mind was already elsewhere. Not in the past with its loss and sacrifice, but in a future suddenly bright with possibility. For 3 days, Sophia taught her regular students, cleaned her apartment, called her mother's care facility to check on her, and did everything possible to avoid thinking about Eleanor's offer. She left Richard's and Lily's messages unanswered. She put Eleanor's business card in a drawer. She told herself she was being practical, responsible. But each night after her last student left, she found herself at the piano, playing pieces she hadn't touched in years. Beethoven sonatas, Bach preludes, Chopin études. Her fingers fumbled at first, muscle memory fighting against years of disuse, but each hour of practice brought improvement. By the third night, she was playing sections of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, a showpiece she had once performed to standing ovations. On the fourth morning, Sophia's phone rang. It was her mother's care facility. "Ms. Chen, this is Nurse Patel from Sunshine Meadows. Your mother had a difficult night." Sophia's stomach dropped. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's stable now, but she became very agitated around midnight. She was looking for something or someone. She kept saying she needed to get to the concert hall, that she would be late for your performance." Sophia closed her eyes, a wave of pain washing over her. Her mother's dementia often pulled her into the past, but she rarely remembered Sophia's music career. Usually her confusion centered around her husband or her own childhood. "I'll come right away," Sophia said. An hour later, she sat beside her mother's bed, holding her thin hand. Mei Chen was dozing, her face peaceful now, though the nurses said she'd been inconsolable during the night. "Mom," Sophia said softly, not wanting to wake her but needing to speak. "I'm so sorry for everything you lost because of me." Her mother's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, there was no recognition in them, just the blank confusion that had become increasingly common over the past year. Then a spark of awareness returned. "Sophia," she said with a smile, "my little butterfly." It was her childhood nickname, one her mother hadn't used in decades. Sophia squeezed her hand gently. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Tired," May said. "I had strange dreams." She looked around the room, momentarily puzzled by her surroundings. "Where is your father? Is he at work?" Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. "Dad's not here, Mom." May nodded slowly, seeming to remember. "He's been gone a long time, hasn't he?" Before Sophia could respond, her mother continued. "I heard you playing last night. So beautiful. Chopin, wasn't it?" Sophia stiffened. "You heard me playing?" "At the concert hall. Everyone was clapping so loudly." May's eyes were distant, seeing something Sophia couldn't. "Your father was so proud. We both were." "It was just a dream, Mom," Sophia said gently. "I haven't performed in many years." May looked at her with sudden clarity. "But why not? You have such a gift." The simple question, asked without judgment or expectation, hit Sophia harder than all of Eleanor's persuasive arguments. Before she could formulate an answer, her mother's attention drifted again, her gaze moving to the window. "The birds are singing," she murmured. "Just like in Vienna." Sophia stayed for several hours talking when her mother was lucid, simply sitting with her when confusion took over. As she was preparing to leave, one of the long-term nurses, Diane, stopped her in the hallway. "Your mother had something she wanted to give you," Diane said. "She was quite insistent about it yesterday before the episode." The nurse led Sophia to a small storage closet where residents' personal items were kept. She pulled out a shoebox that Sophia recognized from her mother's closet, dust coating its lid. "She kept asking for this," Diane explained. "Said it was important that you have it." Sophia thanked her and took the box, curious about what could be so important that her mother, who often couldn't remember what she had for breakfast, had been so determined to give it to her. Back in her apartment, Sophia set the box on her kitchen table and carefully removed the lid. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, all reviews of her performances from her teenage years. Beneath them was a stack of programs from recitals and competitions, her name circled in faded ink on each one. And at the very bottom, a small velvet pouch. Sophia opened the pouch and tipped its contents into her palm. A delicate gold pendant in the shape of a butterfly emerged, attached to a fine chain. She recognized it immediately, a gift from her parents after her first major competition win. She had thought it lost during one of their moves after her father's death, when they had been forced to downsize repeatedly. Attached to the pouch was a small note in her mother's handwriting, shaky but legible, for Sophia to wear when she returns to the stage. "Music is your wings." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. Even as her memories faded, May had held on to this belief that somehow, someday, Sophia would play again. With trembling fingers, Sophia put on the necklace. Then she reached for her phone and dialed Eleanor's number. "I'd like to discuss the fellowship," she said when Eleanor answered. "I think I'm ready." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Eleanor arranged for Sophia to have access to a practice room with a Steinway grand piano at the Foundation's building downtown. Her teaching schedule was adjusted to free up 4 hours every day for her own practice and lessons with Dr. Anton Petrov. a renowned piano pedagogue who specialized in helping pianists overcome technical problems. Dr. Petrov was a stern taskmaster in his 70s with bushy eyebrows and an unwavering commitment to precision. He made Sophia start from the beginning, scales, arpeggios, hand-on exercises, rebuilding the foundation of her technique. "Your fingers remember," he told her after their first session, "but they have become lazy. We must wake them up properly." It was humbling to be treated like a beginner again, but Sophia understood the necessity. Years of teaching simplified versions of great works to children had created habits she needed to break. Meanwhile, Richard Harrington proved true to his word about sponsorship. He covered the increase in cost for moving Sophia's mother to a private room at a better care facility, one with an excellent music therapy program. He also insisted on having his personal piano technician restore Sophia's home upright to perfect condition, replacing worn parts and meticulously tuning it. "Consider it an investment," he said, when Sophia tried to protest his generosity. "I've never sponsored a musician before, but I'm told it's quite fashionable among my set." Lily was perhaps the most enthusiastic supporter of all. She began practicing with new determination, inspired by the knowledge that her teacher was actually a piano superstar, as she put it. "When you have your first concert back, can I come?" she asked during a lesson. "I want to sit in the front row." "It's not going to be a big event," Sophia warned her. "Just a small recital for friends of the foundation." "Still counts," Lily insisted. "I can tell everyone I knew you when." As the weeks turned into months, Sophia felt herself changing, not just as a musician, but as a person. The fear that had paralyzed her for so long began to recede. In its place grew a cautious excitement, a rediscovery of the joy that had once defined her life. Dr. Petrov gradually moved her from technical exercises to more challenging repertoire. They settled on a program for her first recital, a Bach prelude and fugue, a Beethoven sonata, and the piece that had revealed her true self at Richard's party, Chopin's Ballade No. 1. "You play differently now," Dr. Petrov observed during one of their final sessions before the recital. "The notes are the same, but the music, it has depth it did not have before." "Is that your way of saying I'm better than I was at 19? Sophia asked with a smile. The old teacher shrugged. "At 19 you played like a brilliant child. Now you play like a woman who has lived. Both are valuable, but only one is interesting." The night before the recital, Sophia couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, reviewing the pieces in her mind, imagining her fingers on the keys. What if she froze on stage? What if 15 years away from performing had damaged her ability to connect with an audience? What if her phone chimed with a text? It was from Richard. "Just wanted to wish you luck tomorrow. Lily made me promise to record the whole thing. No pressure." Then another message appeared. That was a joke. The no pressure part, not the recording part. Lily really does want a recording. Despite her nerves, Sophia laughed. She texted back a simple thank you and set her phone aside. Another text came through, this one from Eleanor. "Remember why you play. Not for the audience, not for the critics, not even for me or your mother. You play because the music lives in you and needs to be heard. Sleep well." Sophia clutched the butterfly pendant around her neck and took a deep breath. Eleanor was right. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would be doing what she was born to do, something she had denied herself for too long. The recital hall at the Winters Foundation was an intimate space that seated only about 100 people. When Sophia peeked through the curtain an hour before the performance, she was startled to see it was already nearly full. Eleanor had promised a friendly audience, but she hadn't mentioned it would be a capacity crowd. In the front row, Lily sat between Richard and an elegant woman who must be her mother. Next to them was a nurse from Sunshine Meadows accompanying Mei Chen, who was dressed in her finest outfit, a corsage pinned to her lapel. The sight of her mother there, confused perhaps, but present, brought tears to Sophia's eyes. The rest of the audience appeared to be a mix of foundation supporters, music critics, Eleanor's doing no doubt, and, Sophia blinked in surprise, nearly all of her piano students and their families. They had come to support their teacher, to witness her transformation from instructor to artist. 5 minutes, Miss Chen, the stage manager said quietly. Sophia nodded and stepped back from the curtain. She closed her eyes, centering herself in the silence before the performance. The terror she had expected was there, but it was accompanied by something else, a sense of rightness, of returning to her true path. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the sacrifice, the loss, the years of quiet resignation. She thought of her father, who had believed in her talent enough to give everything for it. She thought of her mother, who had saved that butterfly pendant all these years, waiting for this moment. And she thought of Richard, Harrington's dare that night at his party, the wealthy host who had expected her to provide background music and instead had set in motion a complete transformation of her life. When the stage manager gave her the final cue, Sophia touched the butterfly pendant for luck and walked onto the stage with her head held high, ready to spread her wings and fly again. The lights in the recital hall dimmed as Sophia walked to the gleaming grand piano at center stage. The audience fell silent, 100 pairs of eyes following her progress across the polished wooden floor. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her steps were steady, her posture straight. The butterfly pendant felt warm against her skin, as if charged with her mother's belief in her. Sophia took her seat at the piano bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed her hands in her lap. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them again, she caught sight of her mother in the front row. May was leaning forward in her wheelchair, eyes bright with anticipation. Whether she fully understood what was happening or was just responding to the atmosphere, Sophia couldn't tell. But her presence was everything. Without further hesitation, Sophia lifted her hands to the keys and began the Bach prelude in C major. The piece was deceptively simple, a flowing series of arpeggios that created a hypnotic effect when played well. She had chosen it deliberately as her opening, knowing its familiar patterns would settle her nerves while allowing the audience to adjust to her musical voice. The notes flowed from her fingers like water, each one clear and purposeful. As she played, the years of separation from the stage seemed to fall away. This was where she belonged, in this conversation between composer, performer, and audience, in this moment of shared beauty. She moved seamlessly into the accompanying fugue, where Bach's genius for mathematical precision and emotional depth was on full display. The interweaving voices of the fugue demanded absolute control and clarity, and Sophia delivered both with newfound confidence. When the final notes of the Bach faded away, there was a moment of charged silence before the applause began. Sophia didn't allow herself to bask in it. She took a breath and launched into Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, with its dramatic opening chords and soulful melodies. As her fingers navigated the technical challenges of the piece, Sophia's mind remained strangely calm. Gone was the frantic self-consciousness that had plagued her in the weeks leading up to this moment. Instead, she felt fully present, aware of each note, each phrase, each shift in mood as the sonata unfolded. During the tender second movement, with its singing melody that seemed to speak directly to the heart, Sophia glanced briefly at her audience. Richard was watching with undisguised amazement, as if he still couldn't believe the transformation from the shy piano teacher he had once tried to embarrass. Lily was leaning against her mother, eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. And Dr. Petrov, seated near the back, was nodding almost imperceptibly, his highest form of approval. The third movement, with its rapid perpetual motion, tested the limits of Sophia's rebuilt technique. 6 months ago, she might have stumbled over the treacherous passages, but tonight her fingers flew across the keys with precision and grace, riding the wave of Beethoven's restless energy to its triumphant conclusion. The applause was warmer now, more confident. Sophia allowed herself a small smile as she adjusted the piano bench and prepared for the final piece of her program, the Chopin ballade that had changed everything that night at Richard's party. The opening notes of the ballad filled the hall. Sophia felt a curious doubling of experience, playing the same piece but in such different circumstances. At Richard's party, she had played with a mixture of defiance and resignation, expecting nothing to come from it. Tonight she played with purpose, with the knowledge that this piece had opened a door she had long believed closed, forever. The ballad's narrative structure, moving from its deceptively simple beginning through increasingly complex emotional and technical terrain, seemed to mirror her own journey over the past 6 months. Each section told part of the story: the hesitant beginning, the gradual awakening, the tumultuous middle section with its conflicts and doubts, and finally the thunderous conclusion, passionate and definitive, When she reached the coda, that breathtaking final section where Chopin pushes both pianist and listener to their emotional limits, Sophia surrendered herself completely to the music. Her hands were no longer her own, but instruments of something larger, channels for a beauty that had existed before her and would exist long after. Time seemed to stop, the boundary between performer and audience dissolving in the shared experience of the moment. The final chords rang out, powerful and resolute. Sophia's hands remained poised above the keys for a moment as the sound resonated through the hall. Then she lowered them to her lap and bowed her head. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the audience erupted. They rose to their feet as one, applause thundering through the small space. Sophia stood and turned to face them, overwhelmed by the response. Lily was jumping up and down, clapping wildly. Richard was wiping his eyes discreetly. Eleanor, standing at the back of the hall, gave Sophia a small nod that contained volumes of approval and vindication. But it was her mother's face that Sophia sought in the crowd. May was smiling, tears streaming down her cheeks. In her eyes was a clarity that had become increasingly rare. Recognition, pride, and love shining through the fog of her condition. She lifted her thin hands to join the applause, the effort clearly taxing but important to her. Sophia bowed deeply, then gestured toward her mother in acknowledgement, causing the applause to intensify. She left the stage with her heart full, only to be called back by the continued ovation. For her encore, Sophia played Debussy's Clair de Lune, the same piece she had shared with her student Tommy weeks earlier. Its gentle beauty coming after the emotional storm of the Chopin felt like a benediction, a moment of peace after a long struggle. Backstage after the recital, Sophia was surrounded by well-wishers, her students hugging her, Richard shaking her hand with newfound respect, music critics asking for interviews, Eleanor beaming with satisfaction. But she slipped away from them as quickly as she could to reach her mother, who was waiting in a small reception room. "Mom," Sophia said, kneeling beside the wheelchair and taking her mother's hands. "You came." May touched her daughter's face. "My butterfly," she said softly. "You were flying tonight." The clarity in her eyes was fading already, but the moment of connection had been real. Sophia pressed her mother's hand to her cheek, too moved to speak. Later that evening, after her mother had been taken back to the care facility, and most of the audience had dispersed, Sophia found herself in the now empty recital hall with Eleanor, Richard, and Dr. Petrov. "Well," Eleanor said, "I think we can call that a successful comeback." "Indeed," Dr. Petrov agreed with unusual enthusiasm. "The technique still needs refinement in places, but the musicality—" He made a chef's kiss gesture. "Extraordinary." Richard looked somewhat shell-shocked. "I'm not an expert like these two, but even I could tell that what happened tonight was special." He shook his head in wonder. "And to think that if Lily hadn't insisted on inviting her piano teacher to my party, none of this would have happened." "Actually," Sophia corrected him with a small smile, "none of this would have happened if you hadn't dared me to play that night." "One of my better mistakes," Richard admitted ruefully. Eleanor clapped her hands decisively. "This is just the beginning." The critics were impressed. I saw at least 3 of them taking notes furiously during the Chopin. "We'll have offers for more recitals by tomorrow, perhaps a small tour next year. And there's talk of a recording contract." Sophia held up her hand. "One step at a time, please." "Tonight was overwhelming enough." "Of course," Eleanor conceded. "But the music world has been waiting 15 years for your return, whether they knew it or not. They won't want to wait much longer now that they've had a taste." That night back in her apartment, Sophia sat at her newly restored upright piano. The instrument seemed different somehow, as if it too had been transformed by her journey. Or perhaps it was just that she approached it differently now. Not as a tool for teaching or a painful reminder of what she had lost, but as a partner in something meaningful and important. She played softly, improvising around themes from the evening's program, unwinding from the intensity of the performance. Her phone buzzed occasionally with congratulatory messages from friends and students, but she let them go unanswered for now. This moment was for her alone. 6 months had passed since that night at Richard's mansion, when a wealthy host's dare had changed the course of her life. 6 months of hard work, of confronting fears and limitations, of rediscovering a part of herself she had locked away for too long. And now a new chapter was beginning, There were practical concerns still to be addressed. She would need to decide which students to keep teaching, and which to refer to other teachers as her performance schedule increased. She would need to find a balance between her rekindled career and her responsibility to her mother. She would need to navigate a classical music world that had changed significantly during her absence. But for tonight, those concerns could wait. Tonight was for savoring the simple truth that had been revealed. The music had never left her. It had been waiting patiently all along, through the years of sacrifice and compromise, ready to emerge again when she found the courage to let it. Sophia touched the butterfly pendant at her throat and smiled. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Music is your wings. After 15 years on the ground, she was flying again, and this time she wouldn't come down. The next morning, Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through her window and a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls and messages, from Eleanor, from critics requesting interviews, from former colleagues who had recognized her name in the Foundations program. But the message that caught her eye was from Richard. Turns out I have connections at the symphony. Their regular soloist for next month's Rachmaninoff concert just canceled for medical reasons. I might have mentioned your name. Call Eleanor, she has details. Sophia laughed out loud. 6 months ago, the thought of performing a concerto with an orchestra would have terrified her. Today, it felt like exactly the challenge she needed. As she made her coffee, Sophia noticed a small package that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a child's drawing of a woman playing a piano on a stage, with an audience full of smiling faces. At the bottom, in careful block letters, my teacher, Ms. Chen, the piano star, and signed by Tommy. Sophia pinned the drawing to her refrigerator, next to her mother's note about the butterfly pendant. Then she sat at her piano and began to practice, ready to embrace whatever came next. The hidden brilliance that Richard's dare had revealed wasn't just her musical talent. It was her resilience, her capacity for growth, her willingness to begin again. The wealthy host had meant to embarrass her that night, but instead, he had inadvertently helped her rediscover her purpose. As her fingers moved through the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, Sophia felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Eleanor's guidance or Richard's support or her students' faith in her, but for her own journey, with all its unexpected turns. Some talents cannot be buried forever. Some lights refuse to be dimmed, and sometimes the longest detours lead exactly where we were meant to go all along.